Um, Hello, guys. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Kirill Tokarev, and I work at 80 level. And today I want to do a little lecture for you, talk a little bit about some advice from video game developers as to how to succeed in their career in games. Oops. So, a couple of words about 80 level. This is a media website and a couple of other projects. We have been working for about 7 years. Have a large audience, mostly of video game developers who work in different parts of the production, including art, uh, tech, and all the things in between. We also have a recruiting service, which is mostly aimed at creatives and people who are working with 3D art and tech art, and we help them find work in some premium video game studios. So before I kind of start my journey into these recommendations, I want to tell you a little story. And this is a story that we heard from Jeff Kaplan, who at the time worked at Blizzard Entertainment and helped build Overwatch. While they were building Overwatch, they were sort of trying to figure out the style for all the different environments they were creating for the game. And that style didn't have to be 100% realistic, so to speak. So they were mostly inspired by here and there different elements. They had a very nice environment art team who were building these incredible scenes, but they were from different places around the world, places like Germany, Brazil, Belgium, United States, and not all of them had the same background. So when the time came to build a map that was kind of inspired by Hollywood, Jeff Kaplan and his team they decided to make a little field trip. So they took their environment art team who was working on that level, and they drove them to Hollywood, where they can check out the backlot, see how the studios operated, how the different elements there worked, like the sound stages and all that stuff. So the artists were very inspired, and they saw this interesting, new world for them. And on their way back, they actually saw, the real Hollywood Boulevard. And if anyone ever was at that place, you will 100% say that it's not really glamorous and not something that you think about when you look and you look here Hollywood. So these artists, they kind of went through that Hollywood Boulevard thing, saw a lot of things that they shouldn't have seen, and then they came back to the office. They said to Jeff Kaplan that they made a huge mistake, and they figured that everything was wrong, and they wanted to redo the levels. And Jeff Kaplan and the management, they were shocked because they didn't really want that happening. Instead, they wanted to create this dream of, glamorous, beautiful Hollywood, kind of from the days gone. So when we think about video game production, I feel like it's the same story. You come with a certain expectation that this is some kind of an incredible hobby-like work where you play a bunch of games, you figure out interesting features and mechanics, but at the end, you end up a little bit disillusioned. And the purpose of my talk today is to kind of give you little pieces of advice that can help you push forward and achieve your goals, and most importantly, to keep working in this industry. So where did we get our data? Basically, it started as an anecdotal ask on my Facebook page. I just went around and asked an open question like, what would what would your advice be to someone who's starting their career in games and who wants to pursue a career in games? And a lot of people actually pitched in. There was a lot of interesting comments, and these are just some of the people who helped me. And they work in a bunch of different companies, from Bungie to Blizzard to a lot of European studios and so on. So the first thing that they said, that you need to choose wisely. So there were a lot of jokes, people saying that you should never do it. I especially like this guy who said that you just need to run from whatever you're trying to do in video games. But actually, if you put jokes aside, all the other comments were actually very interesting. But the thing here is that you still need to ask yourself whether you really want to do this, whether you really want to build games for a living, because it's a challenging thing to do. And if you don't really love games, you shouldn't really be working there. So one of the biggest things we saw across the board is that, especially for creatives and artists, you need to know your basics. You need to know how anatomy works. You need to figure out how the rules of thirds work. You need to know the composition and all those things that you learn at art school. While some people might think that this is not really useful, not practical, most of the artists who achieved something in video games actually know all of that, and they have a wonderful background, and they know the basics, and they are great painters or creators and so on. The thing is that these rules, they apply to everything that you create, so you need to know them in order to produce anything that would be realistic and that would actually attract the human eye. Another big thing, and then I guess everyone kind of supported this, is that you need to be a lifelong student. So working in games means that you're constantly bombarded by some new technology, some new processes, some new workflows. And in order to succeed, you need to understand how they work. So you need to learn constantly. And as an illustration here, I give you a little slide from a presentation from DICE, where they talked about the integration of photogrammetry flow into their production. And with the photogrammetry flow, they managed to decrease asset production time almost twice. So basically, everyone in the studio had to learn that and work with those assets and figure out how it works. If you don't want to learn and you don't really want to figure out photogrammetry, most likely you would be fired or just wouldn't be able to compete with all the other people who are working there. Another important aspect here is that you need to be inspired, and being inspired doesn't mean just like the spiritual thing and so on, but it also means looking at other people's work. So if you know Squid Game, the famous TV show at Netflix, you look at it and you kind of see shapes and forms that you kind of have seen somewhere before, and you did see them, right? So you saw them like in the Midnight Heist, and you saw those shapes in a certain console. But the lesson here is that you need to be inspired, and you take something from others and rework it and build something of your own out of it. But you should never copy frame by frame or word by word and so on. Copying is bad. Being inspired by somebody else's work is, everybody's doing this. Another big comment that came up time and time again is that you need to practice. I know it sounds like my Captain Obvious comment, but this is something that people, especially when they're just beginning their careers, they don't really appreciate or pay attention to, because all the people who started working in games, they had years of practice. And I'm just gonna give you this little example. So this is a very well-known environment artist who started with these sketches at school. So he was drawing these interesting caves with beautiful lighting, and it was all 2D. And he ended up working at a lot of different companies, including Naughty Dog, where he created those amazing environments for Last of Us 2 and Uncharted 4. And now Brian Rectenwald is actually working at Apple. So you need to practice all the time, every day, every night, in order to be successful and compete successfully in this market. Um, Another point that we figured out is that you need to concentrate on your portfolio. You need to figure out what do you want to do, what kind of work do you want to produce, and your portfolio need to tell the story. It is important to show what you can do well. It is important that you need to show that you can finish projects and not just kind of go and upload a bunch of unfinished stuff on your 80 level talent page or ArtStation or Behance or whatever you're using. Make sure that you highlight your skills and explain what you do best, because these decisions on portfolios, they are being made very quickly, and people who are hiring, they don't have a lot of time. So you need to show your best and you need to explain exactly what you do. So if you're doing vehicles, show nice vehicles. If you're a matte painter, show beautiful finished matte paintings. If you're an environment artist, it's nice to have a good finished environment there. This is an interesting one. So the comment goes like this: you need to know what you like and know what the market needs. Um, I like this example here from one of the artists who is like contributed to ADLL a couple of times, and she's amazing. She's doing these incredible little dioramas, like little environments with a bunch of detail, nice colors, and so on. But this is not exactly what she's doing for work. So you need to understand that these things that you show in your portfolio, the things that you work on, they have to be applicable to certain projects. So if you are concentrating on these stylite works, you might get a job at King or Blizzard or some other studios, but maybe they won't work at, Naughty Dog or a studios that kind of want to have some more realistic scenes. So you need to figure out where you want to go first and then start building your portfolio on your way to the studio of your dream. Another thing that you should remember is that feedback is not really personal. And as an illustration, just want to give you a little bit of piece from research done by Columbia University. So Columbia University surveyed two groups of students who were studying French. One was a beginner level, so they were just trying to figure out how the language works, and one was more advanced. And what they figured out is that people who are actually working, just starting to work on something, learning something, they really appreciate positive feedback. They don't want to hear about their mistakes. They would want to get some kind of encouragement and understand what they're doing well. At the same time, people who are more advanced and they have already learned something, they, on the other hand, want to learn more about what they did wrong. They want to figure out their mistakes, improve, and become even better. The same applies to video game production. Sometimes in studios, you can hear a lot of different feedback. First of all, if you're getting harsh feedback, it means that you're a professional. You're supposed to deal with it and figure out how to do it. And whatever kind of feedback you figure out, you get, remember that it's not personal. It's all being done for the better of the project in the end. I should note that you should also know how to give feedback. And while I said that sometimes the feedback can be harsh, I don't feel like this is the only way that you should do it. And I think there is a wonderful story from a book, Bird by Bird, by Anne Lamott, who talked about her writing class. And she runs these writing classes where people are sitting in a circle, they read their stories, and then they give feedback to one another. And one of those, participants in that course, he passed the story around. He read the story, and the story wasn't really very good. It was kind of like mediocre. And most people in the group, they were, they didn't really give any harsh criticisms. They were saying like, okay, it's maybe there you should work a little bit on it, and so on and so forth. And but there was one lady there who stood up and said that, am I the only sane person here? Am I the only person who knows that he did a terrible job and probably should never write again? And she told all that to in front of the group and to the face of the person who wrote the story. And she turned all red and and so on. And after that, when the session kind of ended, and Lamont, welcomed this lady, and the lady said that you think I'm a horrible person. And then Lamont, who is a teacher as well as a writer, she said that no, I don't feel that way, but I do think that you don't always have to chop with a sword of truth, and sometimes you just confront with it. So maybe sometimes you do need to be a little bit gentle, not to insult the other person. Um, a question that we are getting asked a lot, like, do you need to know tech art? And the short answer to it is yes. If you add something of with a tech element to your portfolio, that's always a big plus. Video games are technical. There's programming involved. There's a lot of engineering done. And if you know some of the elements here and there, it might help you tremendously. So if you can learn, more proceduralism in Blender, if you can learn more stuff that can be done with Houdini, eventually it's gonna serve you well. It doesn't mean though that you can be a great artist and know nothing about all of the tech tools and still be successful. But it does help a lot if you're a beginner, if you're just starting out, to know something to work, how to work with blueprints, how to work with this and that, to make yourself more employable. If you look at the stuff that we have on 80 level, we see that a lot of people are actually specialized. So they specialize in environment art, and props, and characters, and so on. But there are very few people who are doing tech art, who are doing VFX, and some of the more complex stuff that does involve a little bit of coding. So if you do know that, if you know those elements, then you just make yourself more employable. Another great comment we got is that you need to know what to do right, but also what not to do wrong. So games are technical, as I said, and there are a lot of elements involved. And sometimes you don't really want to mess with somebody else's tech. And there's this wonderful example from a tech artist who was optimizing Witcher 3. And while they were optimizing Witcher 3, they saw a little weird behavior there. So they basically saw these buckets filled with something white, which were millions of polygons. And when they tried to figure out what that was, it was basically a bucket filled with 3D models of chickens. And therefore, it became an incredibly complicated object with a lot of geometry that processor had to go through a lot of, you know, used a lot of power to just render this thing. These examples, things like that, they really hurt their overall production process. And if you don't follow the optimization techniques that your studio has, it doesn't mean what kind of great work you're doing. You're still going to be pulling everyone back. Another interesting example of how to get into the industry we got from people who said that you should try modding. And if you look at all these people, the guy behind PUBG, the guy who's currently a chief evangelist of Unreal Engine 5 at Epic, the person who created Counter-Strike, all of them actually started with modding. It's a great way to get into the way that to understand how games are produced. It's a great way to start building some games, and it's eventually a great gateway into game design and your own game production. This is a path for more entrepreneurial people, but it is a very successful path, and a lot of people actually achieve great things when they're doing that. We're kind of coming to the end. There are a couple of important things, though. So one of them is that you need to network. The industry is very small. There's not that many people there, so you need to know as many as possible. If you go to any studio, any recruitment department there, you will understand that a lot of the new hires are being made through some kind of internal recommendations. Usually people just go to their department, the art department, and ask, we need this guy, whom can you recommend? And then they refer them to different individuals, and this is how the story unfolds. So if you know more people, maybe you'll get more chances to be recommended and get a better reference. So networking is super important. And you can go to events like this or any bigger events, it doesn't really matter. Wherever you are, meet people, talk to them, make friends, figure out how you can work together. One of the most important ones and often overlooked is that you need to take care of yourself. Video game development is a harsh process. There's a lot of things involved. Sometimes there's crunch. Sometimes you need to work when you're sick and all of those things. So you need to remember to take care of yourself. And this includes sleep, health, as well as your savings. Unfortunately, this didn't really change over the years. When some big projects closes, people are getting fired. So you need to have your savings, you need to think about your retirement accounts and do all this boring thing that you might not want to do, but this will serve you well in the future. To kind of summarize, I want to say that you still need to take this advice with a grain of salt. This is advice that is coming from people who actually survived in this industry and they managed to achieve some success. But there are a lot of people who come into games, they stay for a little while, and then they leave. And unfortunately, I don't have any comments from those guys. But believe me, there's always a reason somebody's leaving or somebody doesn't want to work there. So you just need to take your own journey and try to understand how you want to go through this process. What kind of choices do you want to make? And the advice that HS gave from our community, this is just like a little bit of a roadmap that can help you navigate along the way. Um, with that, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. And if you have any questions, please send us emails. You can also go to 80 level, 80.lv/talent to register in our service if you're looking for a job. And this includes both people who are looking for a job as well as employers.